Well, hello, Trevor.
Hey, Andy, what's going on?
It's nice to see you here sitting in for Patrick.
Glad to be on board.
Yeah, now I know that this is a show that you wanted to do for a long time, and I'm really excited that we finally have a chance to do it.
Oh yeah. No, when I first came up with the idea for it, I didn't think that I'd actually be on the show talking about it. I thought it'd be in the background where, thankfully, CJ's taking the reins today.
I don't know. I always imagined you would be on it. I mean, it's your idea, and you want to be part of the conversation. So it was never. I never thought you weren't going to be here.
Oh, okay. I wish you would have told me that. Jeez.
I probably should have.
Awesome. Very
Well,
awesome.
it's great to see you. I'm excited to do the show and talk about freelancers and the current job market.
Yeah, very simplified title for a very big subject to get into. And asked a few key and fun people, I feel like, to kind of join us today and talk about what their experiences have been like. And the whole impetus of the show is basically just trying to at least ask the questions, talk about what we've been through, and maybe we can help each other out, have some answers. But we'll see what happens for next week, part two, where we hopefully will be finding answers to some questions, even if we don't have answers today, about personal branding specifically in this new, very weird market.
Yeah, for sure. But first, let's get to the news.
Yes, the news.
I don't know if we have graphics or not for that. But
There's a couple.
yeah, I think the first thing that's most interesting to me was the postponement of the big move of Disney to Lake Nona,
I think it's
um,
Nona.
to
Yeah.
Disney Parks and Entertainment experience products, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, to 2026, which is in my mind sort of indefinite. I mean, 2026 sounds so far away, but like I feel like that date is so far off on purpose just to make it, so there's maybe some plausible deniability that it's just kind of never going to happen, especially,
Yeah. No,
if
it's weird because it's a full 4 years from here, from right
yeah,
now.
yeah, you could go to college and be a doctor in that time.
Which wasn't the original date, end of 2023.
I think so. Yeah.
The very initial one that was announced a year ago, so that would have given them a year and a half, and now it's a year later, delayed a full 4 years from here. So a 5-year announcement. Ultimately, if they do go according to the current plan, it's a full 5 years before the actual move date that they would have announced it.
Between you and me, I think it's not going to happen. I think that Chapek won't last that long, and whoever's next is going to cancel it.
I mean, there's any number of reasons. I've heard plenty of speculation, both internally and externally, but I don't know. Every reason sounds valid to me at this point, whatever it might be, whether it's the political landscape, internal arguments, any sort of like not dissension, but internal frustration. I mean, I get it, but I mean, it could be a weird combination of all those things. But we'll see. Who knows?
It's definitely a dynamic situation. Yeah. And what other news do we have?
Universal Orlando doing the announcement of the escape rooms for City Walk.
That's right. Yeah, my whole Facebook lit up of people that have been working on that quietly for the last year. So it's like, this is what I've been doing.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually thinking about this for the last few years, that I thought that for like Disneyland, downtown Disney, that some of those retail spaces that are a little bit more problematic to keep filled, that you could do something like that. So now Universal just kind of like come in and just done it themselves.
Show them how it's done one more time.
Mm-hmm. Which I think it'll be great. Which actually, if we can talk about this when they're on, but I think Melody actually is working on that. I think she posted something about it this week. So, yeah, we can talk about that in a bit for sure. I think it'll be fun though. Like the fact that it's like, because what are the first two? It's Back to the Future, which is a ride that is extinct at this point, and Jurassic Park, right?
Yeah, Jurassic World, I think.
Oh, Jurassic World.
Jurassic Park. Okay. Yeah, Jurassic World. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what these are like. I'm working on some escape rooms right now, doing music and audio and stuff like that. I don't know what kind of scale they're going for, like what the throughput is, and like how many how many different rooms there are, like how many different experiences. It's going to be really interesting to learn more as more is revealed. I don't expect Melody to reveal anything today, but I'm just curious. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle throughput and cost point and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it'll be cool. I mean, I'm kind of excited for it. It's that exploration of smaller, more cost effective experiences, but out of berm.
Yeah, I think it's really clever, really smart, and I think keeping the money in the company, even after you leave or before you go to the parks, if you're, I could totally imagine, getting to Orlando after the parks close, but you're hanging out at City Walk and you still want that Universal experience. You can go and do the escape rooms and have Back to the Future times.
Oh, for sure. But that's also, I mean, cool. I'm still going to say that's a short-term thing. I think that this is a proof of concept of how you can regionalize this, and you can kind of have these pop up, take over spaces in malls that are closed down, take over an anchor store like a closed down Macy's, and there you go.
Yeah. I know a lot of people have been looking for ways to do that and solutions to those problems. That's really cool. Yeah. Well, speaking of Melody, why don't we bring on all of our guests, including Melody Matheny and Kira Prince and Teddy Leo.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Welcome, you guys.
Hi.
What's going on?
Hey guys, doing?
Hey.
Thanks for being on the show. Very excited to see you.
Glad to be here.
Trevor, why don't you kick it off?
All right. So everybody here has got a different type of experience. First and foremost, just at the length that they've all been freelancers within the themed entertainment industry. So Andy and Melody have obviously the most years and experience under their belt at this point. Kira and I are kind of in the same boat of being, not fresh out of school, got a few years for us, but still, early enough in our careers that, there's trying to find, I feel, at least for me, trying to find a certain kind of trajectory. And then someone like Teddy, who unfortunately graduated at the beginning part of the pandemic, and that has made for, and I've heard from a number of people, but hearing your story specifically, just how that has made it difficult to just kind of get the engine started.
That's an understatement.
So off of that, actually, then Teddy, I mean, you had emailed me about this, but would you mind just kind of giving a little bit of what you've been experiencing since graduating up until now?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. So yeah, like you mentioned, I graduated in 2020. A year before graduating, I started, reaching out to connections, setting up lunches and everything in Orlando to, meet with people that I was kind of getting ready to try to pivot into getting, the first real job in the industry. And then all of a sudden people started messaging me and be like, hey, can we reschedule those lunch meetings? My business is closing down for a few weeks till this pandemic blows over. And it's been 2 years. So obviously lots happened in there, and a lot's happened in the industry and just in the world and globally. But one of the things I've noticed personally is when I graduated college, my plan was to pivot into those entry-level, internships and everything like that. And by the time those came back online, now it's been so many years that I actually don't qualify for those anymore. So now I'm in this kind of weird spot where it's trying to figure out, like, do you go back to get a master's or try to go to community college or something like that to be able to qualify again for these positions? Or, do you wait it out, pivot into a different industry? I've been working since I was in high school in comic books. So I was lucky and fortunate enough that the comic book company that I've been working with had an open position after like a year of being unemployed during the pandemic. So I've been able to pivot into that and still get to tell stories and work with awesome creators and everything. But, there's this weird spot right now of, how do you jump into the industry? Kind of how you guys touched earlier in the show. Where is the kind of center of the industry going to be? Is it going to be in Orlando? Is it going to be still out in California? Like, where's Imagineering going? All these kind of variables that are kind of still up in the air as the industry comes back online. So I'm honestly super interested to hear what you guys think about this, because I'm still learning tremendously and trying to figure it all out as we go. And it's been crazy to try to do it in the pandemic and recovering from the pandemic.
Can I ask a question? I'm just going to jump right in here. Teddy, what do you mean by you're not eligible for entry-level positions? What do you mean by that now?
Yeah, so like the internships and everything, a lot of them will have like you have to be 8 months out of either 8 months recently graduated or still be in a like specific class or still be like a junior or senior in college. So now that I'm now 2 years out, like those internship programs I don't qualify for. So a lot of times I'll get responses like, hey, you don't qualify for this. And it kind of took me off guard at first. But then those positions a little bit after internships, I've noticed that I've been falling into talking to recruiters and like, hey, listen, like we would have wanted to do an interview with you, but there's so many people that are willing to take like a role like this that they have the experience for a different role, but just because everyone's trying to get a job, which makes sense. Everyone has to, pay rent, put food on the table and everything. Like we'll come back to you maybe in a few months or a year or so once we kind of the hiring craziness kind of rolls or like, it's a little bit less crazy, I guess, from right now. So that's one of the big problems I would say that's with the bigger spots. So like Universal Creative, Imagineering, and then the smaller studios and stuff, that's where it's kind of interesting of trying to figure out like where do I go, Orlando or California? At first I was looking like, I should try to more push towards Orlando, but every few months it seems like it gets delayed and maybe that's not the center. Maybe people are going to be split. So it's just kind of like figuring out who to make connections with in those other places,
Gotcha. Because I was going to say, I wonder if those smaller companies, you can talk to more freely about your entry-level position, and they're not going to hold as tight to their original rules, their pre-COVID rules anymore, So anyway, I could go on and on with you, Teddy. We'll talk later, but
yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
And Melody, one of the things I've heard, because I'm sort of in this kind of in between Trevor and Teddy's situation where I had a career freelancing before I went to grad school. Now it's been about a year since I've graduated from grad school. And a lot of the smaller companies, some of them are hiring interns, but a lot of them are in a position where, the ramp up from COVID has been so like, rapid and intense that they don't feel that they have the time or the money to train people or bring people. And that's in entry level positions and in internships. And so they're stuck needing to find someone immediately for a role. And they're like, you'd be a great candidate, but we need, you need some shaping, you need some experience versus I can hire someone who has 10 years of experience and was laid off from WDI and I can hire them now and they can do the job. And that's kind of a trap that I think a lot of us, I know I have several people, in the same sort of situation.
Yeah, I have heard that. Heard that a lot.
And I've seen so many positions open that say entry level, and then you look down and it says requires 5+ years of experience.
Yeah.
How
right,
is that
exactly.
possible?
It's that trap of, the entry level position doesn't seem to exist right now. You have internships which are treated like entry level positions, and then the immediate step up from that is like a 5-year experience role. And even things like project coordinator or executive assistant or things that you would think would be things that like, okay, you could jump into and learn on the job. There's a whole line of people who have made executive assisting their career or project coordination their career, and they're in line with you too. So it's a real challenge. And speaking as someone who used to hire people freelance, I've been in a position of companies are like really stressed and put to the brink and have so many projects going on that it doesn't seem like there's time to search for candidates and put in the proactive work necessary. And so when a job opening does come up, it's a mad scramble. Like, who do we know that can start tomorrow? And it kind of causes a crisis because they're not willing to put in that effort early on, but at the same time, they're also sort of not able to.
I've found that that's pretty typical over the last decade, though. I don't think that's post-COVID. I think everyone realizes they need a freelancer. It's at the very 11th hour, and then they're freaking out. So, right, Andy? Has that been your experience too?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and it's funny. I was thinking this morning, whether or not I was going to talk about a certain experience that I've been having with a certain company, which I will clenchingly refrain from naming. I will last year, like about 9 months ago, I had a company, a well-known company, breathlessly email me telling me that they had a project that needed me to work on starting immediately. And I was like, okay, great. I'm available, and let's do this. And then I signed the NDA, and I waited for the materials, and I never got them. And then it was complete radio silence, and they completely ghosted me. And then just like a month ago, completely different people from the same company breathlessly emailed me telling me that they had a project they needed me to start on immediately that opened in like 6 weeks, which is impossible, and turned out to be impossible. But then, they everything is all hot and heavy in the beginning, and then, after 2 or 3 weeks, radio silence, and we talked in the prep show, and the prep call for the show, about being patient, and you can't make people email you back about projects, if they go away or whatever. And it's a weird experience. I've been freelancing for my entire adult life, 25 years or so, and it's amazing how this stuff still happens to me, and it's bizarre sometimes, and there's nothing you can do about it, like literally nothing.
Yeah, and it's that lack of communication, a communication barrier, has seemed to have become more of an issue over time, at least comparing my experience in film to comparing it to now, where there is this trend, it seems, where we're looking for people, and conversations start, and then something happens on there, and the project goes away, or they realize they don't have the money, or whatever. But there's no communicating that back to the people that are looking for jobs, and the person looking for jobs is kind of just like twiddling your thumb and like, what happened? And then and also because they're so busy, when you reach out, your question about whether or not there's a job is not their number one priority, and just kind of slips down further and further on the priority list. And the freelancers just kind of looking around going like, okay, what's happening?
I think
right.
a lot of what this... Andy, you want to go?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that because I've got plenty of my own stories about, someone who they emailed me after having half a dozen conversations with me. They offered an hourly rate. They offered a start date. And then I responded with, because it's a negotiation phase, like, oh, how about this rate? And I can talk tomorrow about this. And then just radio silence, and it just goes away. Or owners of companies who text me, and they're doing an avail check on me because they've got a project that came up with a short timeline, and I say that I'm available, and then I hear nothing. So, we can all go on all day about all the experiences where what we're talking about here is being ghosted by potential employers. But really, it's like, what I think, if there's anybody from any company who has any hiring power, who's paying attention right now, or for any freelancer who's been through this, I think the thing that we're really asking for is, and it takes more time and energy, but some more care for the people that are in this industry, because even though they're not working for you right now, they could potentially work for you in the future. And I think that the worst thing that can happen is if a potential candidate ends up getting burned by that potential employer, that maybe they just never end up wanting to work for them in the future again. Or if they do, they've got a bad taste in their mouth and they don't trust the relationship. Because in the end, we say this all the time at every mixer and every event, this is a very small industry. So I think that whether you're paying somebody or you're being paid by somebody, no matter what, we all just need to make sure we're taking care of our relationships with each other.
Mm-hmm. And that lack of transparency is also a huge barrier to diversity and inclusion initiatives, because if the longer everyone that's trying to freelance only has a certain amount of emotional bandwidth, only a certain amount of financial bandwidth, and like once those things are worn out, like they're out of the industry, they have to go find money, or they have to do something that like doesn't make them like cry in despair because they've been searching for 3 years, they can't find anything, and so that's a huge barrier. And when you're basically eliminating those people from your pool, like over time, and then the only people who are left are the people with relative levels of privilege, who can either afford to do it, who have the mental health, wherewithal to do it, that have the family support. I'm cognizant of that myself. Like I'm lucky enough to have family that lives in Orlando, and I can hang out with them for a while I'm trying to make this career transition. But not everyone has that, and that's a huge barrier. And I think that mentality of like, we need to find someone right now, like it's understandable, but essentially you're kind of acting like as a filter feeder. You're just kind of grabbing like whatever happens to come across your way when you need it. And there's a lack of intention there. But if we're really trying to create more diverse workforce and trying to, be more intentional about what we want this industry to look like going forward, like those are things that we really have to consider.
Yeah, early on in this show, I mean, like by that I mean like 2 years ago, when Patrick and I started doing the show, we talked. One of the first things we talked about was the barrier to entry and the privilege that's often required to sustain the search and the transition into this industry. If you're new, if you're just graduating, you have to have the way the industry is set up, you have to have a certain amount of support network underneath you to get you through, to the next gig or the next job or what have you. And, and even just to get into the industry, it's just like to meet people. You used to just have to go to IAPA to meet all the people that you needed to meet to network and whatnot, and TEA events and whatnot. But like TEA events are usually in just a few cities, Los Angeles or Orlando or whatever. And so there's always been this sort of barrier to entry, with a certain amount of privilege required.
I have a question from my perspective. Obviously, during the pandemic, when I first started trying to reach out to people and everything, it was all digital, right? Like pretty much all of the, conventions and all of those meetups and everything were canceled. And one of the things I kept finding was trying to reach out on LinkedIn, on social media and everything, but doing it in a way that was like respectful. Because, it's hard to ask someone if they could look at your portfolio or if they know if there's any jobs open when that like they're probably also looking for a job right now. So it's like trying to find this balance. But have you guys noticed that the industry is just going back to all those events, like in-person events, or is it kind of blending of like taking some of those digital experiences and meetups and also still having those like in-person? Because like someone obviously from like the Midwest obviously can't get down to Orlando like every single month to go to these things. Like, do you see that they're keeping those in-person events only, or are they kind of just doing both the digital and in-person?
From what I've seen, everyone's racing to go back to in-person events because we all miss each other. And everyone's super excited about that. And so everybody's showing up at the in-person events. But I also have seen many companies and individuals as well just really get a lot more open-minded about doing digital interactions. I mean, way more than 2 years ago. I don't know. What's y'all's experience?
Well, as somebody who's been flying to each coast for the past 5 months as much as I possibly can for mixers, I think that it's a hybrid of both, Teddy. I honestly think it is. I think that there are certain situations where a virtual meet and greet or just reaching out on LinkedIn and having a messaging conversation with someone is more than okay, and more than beneficial. And obviously, ideally a free solution to the question. But then there are instances where, and it's hard to predict, but there are definitely plenty of instances where it's important to actually be there physically in person. I can think back to the beginning of the year, the first TEA mixer after the new year was at El Cholo in Pasadena, and that one felt more like a family reunion than it felt like a professional mixer. It was just everybody was hugging, and I'm sure a few people caught COVID because of it. But it was a great night where, there was probably 200 people, and it was our first time together in a solid 2 years, but it was awesome. It was something that you just needed to be there for. And then there have been a couple of other mixers where I went, this could have been an email.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to figure out what are additional online ways to network, and I think there's some barriers to that too that are pretty subtle. Like for instance, I know for me personally, like I'm always nervous to reach out to people on LinkedIn because there are the people out there that if you try to reach out to them, they're going to be like, and you don't want to be annoying them, and there's a lot of other people I know who like have expressed like, oh, I wish you would have reached out to me on LinkedIn, and as someone who's also hired people and given advice on LinkedIn, I think some of the barrier could be reduced if the people who are actually like interested in talking or wouldn't mind talking like would make that publicly known, rather than the onus always being on the person searching for work or searching for advice. Because I think just that, because sometimes you don't even know who to reach out to, and that just the like small changes like that can, help. And the TA also, to their credit, has done a lot of work to try to make mixers happen in more locations. Like there is that regional mixer initiative, which I have not had a chance to go into any one of those initiatives, but it is a step towards making things more locally accessible.
Well, I'd also like to add that that's literally why we started TETV, which was to give people, young people and people new to the industry, an opportunity to network with each other and our guests, so that anyone from anywhere could come in and volunteer and work on a show, produce, do graphics, like what have you, and everyone had access to everybody. So, and especially people who were hosting and producing shows, you're meeting all these guests and these great people like Melody, and all the the day in the life shows and everything. It's like, and I don't know, I think all the volunteers that are left are on the show right now behind the scenes. And Trevor, we don't have a lot of shows running right now, but like, man, at one point we had 50 or 60 people, and I think all of them left because they got jobs. And even CJ and Charlie, who continue to produce the show, also have jobs still, but thank God they decided to stay.
But yay for getting jobs, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and like Patrick and I were like proud parents every time somebody would sheepishly send us a note saying like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I got a job. I can't do this stuff anymore." And we're like, "No, this is great. We're happy for you."
Yeah, I have a similar experience, Andy, running Slice Creative Network. For those who don't know what Slice is, it's an online network for creative freelancers working in the themed entertainment industry. And it's the same thing where, like, when we have a ton of members, it means that a lot of people are looking for work, essentially, right? So when our membership shrinks, I'm actually more happy because it means that everybody's working and doing really great out there. So it's the same kind of bittersweet thing, Andy, that I have with Slice.
Yeah, it's great. I'm just thrilled. I'm so glad. I just looked at the comments. I'm so glad that Jason McManus chimed in, because I was going to invoke him. Thanks for watching the show, everybody. Michael Libby and Damian Montanillo, everybody. Hi, everybody. I should look at the comments sooner.
There's a bit there, but while you're doing that, I actually want to second one thing that you said, Andy. I think that it is really, it is a great thing, volunteering with TETV too, like you said, to be able to network with people that we otherwise would not have naturally kind of crossed paths with. So it's good to kind of almost have an excuse to be able to make a connection with somebody. So whether it's that, whether it's TEA, whether it's Slice, I think that Teddy, that's also another big thing, is just get involved. It's kind of a two-pronged thing where it's like, yeah, there's kind of an agenda of, I want to meet people so that hopefully professionally things will advance for me. But as long as this is something that I've always personally believed, is that if you can kind of have the relationship be a two-pronged thing always, both personal and professional, then that helps from things seeming disingenuous. But again, we all always need to kind of lean on each other anyways and help each other out when one of us needs it. I help you out one day, and then a couple years down the line you help me out. So but getting involved is just the way to start in the to begin with, in whatever way it is.
It was interesting, you guys talking about like making TETV and everything. I remember when I was about to graduate, I saw Patrick posted, "Hey, I'm about to start the show. Like, so you're about to graduate." And I was like, perfect. That's exactly what I need right now. I was like, what am I supposed to do when this like just shut down all of a sudden? So like since then, like I always like tune into the show and everything and like listen in. Like just from my perspective, like what you guys have all created with this thing has helped me tremendously. I have to say, like when I remember filing for unemployment the day I was supposed to be graduating, and I was having like a party and stuff. And like I was sitting there with my roommates and we're like, okay, so how do you work this government site to try to make sure we get unemployment and everything? And like that night I had a reminder that was like, oh, for first episode or whatever of this new show, like I'm gonna go watch it real quick. And like I remember just thinking like, okay, thank God there's like some resource out there that I could go to and like listen to the show and somewhat get like some guidance. Because early on I felt like I have not, like everything that I had planned and thought like, okay, I could do this and then I'll do this, just like got thrown out the window in like a few like day period. I was like, what do I do? So this, for me, this whole TETV has been like amazing. Every time there's a new episode, I've always like tuned in because it's been perfect. It's literally exactly what I needed in the time that I needed it. So I can't thank you all for enough to putting it on, honestly.
Well, that feels really good. Thank you for saying that. That's nice to hear. Sometimes I feel like we're just yelling into the void.
I honestly, Andy, you're one of my favorite. Every time you're talking about stuff, I'm always like, oh, I can't wait to hear what Andy says about this.
Oh.
This is gonna be good. This is gonna be good.
Wow, I said like my unhinged rant a few weeks ago ahead of the review. I'd like to address John Kelton's question. CJ, if you could bring up the most recent question from John. As someone who lived through 2008, 2009 as well, and Melody obviously too. I don't know. I feel that it's very different this time around. Last time, projects just completely evaporated, and then it, I don't know, it feels different. I don't know, Melody, how do you feel? Does it feel different this time from that time? Because it feels different from me, because like that felt like a very sort of like it's hard to say. It's hard to I should have thought about this more before I brought it up. And Teddy's going to regret hoping to hear what I have to say. No, I think that, okay, I'm just going to say that this time feels different because I was still working during the pandemic. I was very lucky to still have 2 projects in 2020, and then 2021 was very difficult, and things are just now picking up for me. But it feels like things in 2008, 2009, things just completely evaporated, and entire projects and entire companies just completely evaporated. This time it feels like a lot of stuff is just put on hold, and some people continued working. There was a contraction, obviously, but like it feels like things that were planned for 2 years ago are now coming back online rather than just having completely evaporated. And it just feels like there was like just a hold. Everything was like a long holding pattern. And you know, there's a lot of ramping up happening right now, it feels like to me. I mean, I'm starting to get calls and doing RFPs and ROMs and things like that for projects that, you know, I thought I was going to be doing 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think, I can't speak to the 2008 versus COVID comparison, but I am a little concerned about what's happening in the economy, like right this second, and what might happen moving forward. There's a lot of talk of a housing crash coming sometime soon, and we know that there's the rise of like extreme political extremism, and I think all of that is bubbling up and could very well result in another economic crisis. That I think that's really concerning to me. But the COVID immediate impact seemed to be a little bit less concerning in the short term. I'm not sure how it's going to spell out in the long term.
I kind of feel like that's always the case, though, Kira. Like the country and the world's kind of always experiencing some kind of drama. So, like, I feel like we're going to always be in this situation. But I do feel the same way as you, Andy, in regards to comparing this to 2008, 2009. I had the same exact experience where 2008, 2009 just bottomed out, and like I had to work in the wedding industry. Which was great, and I loved it. I'm not knocking it at all. It's great, but
money, weddings and funerals.
Yeah, I had to completely switch industries and just make money wherever I could until that blew over, which was a long time. And this time was a lot different. Like you said, there was just it felt like things were being held on by a very thin string, but that when it came back, it's now growing exponentially very quickly. And I didn't remember that happening in 2008, 2009 at all.
No,
So,
I was doing a lot more work in film and television in 2008 and video games as well. I was signed on to do a really big AAA video game, my first in a long time, and of course it went away, just went gone like that. And also a major movie I was supposed to do as well that also just went away overnight. And it was devastating. I was just doing, and so I was just doing like trailers here and there and commercials and things like that I would normally have never done, not because they were beneath me, but because I never spent the time searching out those kinds of jobs. It was really difficult. It was a really difficult time. Yeah, this feels a lot different, and especially the general, I don't know, mood feels different. I think everybody is a lot, there's a lot more positivity out there, I think, than it was before, where it was just like everybody just felt beat down.
Mm-hmm. And it's coming back so fast.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I see so much happening, steamrolling right now, and it wasn't like that before.
Yeah. Everybody, I think now everybody has a sense of like, let's try to get back to normal, or a new normal at least. Like everybody wants to go back to working on great projects with great people, and figuring it out, how to make it work.
Yep. Great
Well, talking
question,
about all of
John.
that, then for Andy and Melody, if you want to talk about it, like what was it like in the early years of your careers of basically trying to get the attention of companies and try to land work, whether it was longer term work or 3 months, 6 months, that sort of thing? What was it like back then, and how is that different from now?
Well, I mean, I can say that the kind of climate that existed then is never going to be seen again. It's just completely different now. The industry is so much bigger, and there's so many more people, so many more companies. When I was in college, I've told this story on the show before. I hate to repeat myself, and I'm not trying to brag or anything. It's weird, but like, I literally just asked Buddy Baker, how do I get a job in Imagineering? And he opened up his black book and gave me a name and a phone number. He said, call Glenn Parker, tell him I told you to call. And the next week I worked at Imagineering. So like, that doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, that kind of thing doesn't happen anymore.
Can you give me the phone number of the fairy godmother? Because you clearly have a connection.
Okay, like I said, this was 1994, 95. I mean, it was before the internet, and well, not before the internet, before the World Wide Web. And all of that, and networking was done in person, just like that. You would, had the, like, because I was at USC, I was privileged to have the access to somebody like Buddy Baker, who could just tell me who to call. And then that person's like, oh, Buddy told you? Sure. We'll find something for you to do, I guess. And then the way that I met Dave Cobb, it was very organic as well. I was assisting an architecture professor of mine in researching a book on themed entertainment as a very sneaky way to like have an into the themed entertainment company. So I have a reason to go in there and talk to them because I was doing research and I was pulling images and getting glossy 8x10s from them to include in this like glossy cocktail coffee table book. Just my mind goes straight to cocktails. I'm sorry. Coffee table book. And so I was going to Landmark and meeting the people there and getting information and photos, and one of the people that was assigned to go through the archives with me was Dave Cobb, and we became friends, and I became friends with other people there as well, and then 4 years later, Dave called me and it's like, hey, we need, emergency music for this Men in Black ride that I'm working on. Are you available? Can you do it for this ridiculously low price? And I'm like, sure. And that's how I got to do the music for the Men in Black ride. So it was a no bid process where it was just literally Dave picking up the phone and calling me and saying, do you want to do the music for this $80 million ride? So things like that don't happen anymore. I mean, like the bidding process for Universal in particular is worse than bidding on, things to the military. It's absurd.
We laugh because it's true.
It is. I mean, the bidding process that I went through for Universal Beijing was draconian and unpleasant, and I didn't even bother with Epic Universe. So. Because I knew that they weren't gonna choose me, no matter how low I bid. I knew that they were gonna hire David Kneiper, and I'm sure they did. I don't know, but I knew that they were gonna go with the normal people that are already in Orlando that that they've always worked with.
But I think your comment about about like being with other people and just creating this relationship in real life is very powerful still today. And it just happened to me a couple of days ago. We had like a little impromptu slice mixer thing, and things kind of happen organically where like you're talking to people and you realize, oh, you do that thing that I need to do in my project in a month from now. Oh, we should talk. Oh, yeah. And it's like these things happen all the time. So back to your question, Teddy, about in-person events versus virtual. In-person events are just completely invaluable. Like you must attend them.
Yeah.
And I think having, your social media presence is really important to get people to know your name and just have it click really quickly is very important. But definitely attending in-person events is where it's at.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that in-person networking isn't important anymore because of the things don't happen like that anymore. But Melody, you're absolutely right. Like, these kind of organic meetings where you're like, oh, you do the thing that I need, let's talk in a month or so, absolutely still happens. But there's a lot more steps in between now than there used to be.
Definitely.
Yeah. Andy, I know one of the things we talked about in the pre-show for this was that challenge of existing in that online personal branding space now, where you simultaneously want to say, hey, everyone, look at me, but you also want to be very, very cautious about what you say so you don't attract the wrong kind of attention and either look like you're bragging about yourself or hurting someone's feelings or not being grateful, or the list goes on. And I think that's a really interesting challenge that I found is how do you get that balance, and how do you walk that tightrope of having something interesting to say that gets people to pay attention to you, but not so interesting that they're like, oh, that's a fanboy, I don't want to talk to them, or whatever. I mean, that's a problem child, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think that social media, like, I have a lot of thoughts about that. We talked about it in the pre-show meeting. I think that it's really important to, like, for your public social media, like for me, like Facebook is different. It's all like close personal friends that I've met in person, but like my Instagram and my Twitter is for public consumption. And, Instagram in particular, because I have my business Instagram, I always try to post from a position or a perspective of gratitude, so like if I work on a project, I'm grateful to have worked on it, and I'm grateful to work with these people. I'm grateful to, be in this industry and have these experiences and whatnot. And it's, I think that's really important for public facing social media. And especially, I think, if you look at the social media, the kinds of people, like really higher up, like, executives and whatnot, and the kind of posts that they make, they're there's, and I'm referring to, I think one of those people that does really well is Jason McManus, who is hopefully still watching the show. Thank you again for commenting and watching. Has mastered this point of view of like, isn't this crazy that I get to do this and I can share it with you? Like, come on along for the ride. I think is a really incredible voice that he's developed on social media, and it comes from a place of gratitude, and it's really impressive. And I think that it's a really fine line to walk when you need to have some sort of self-promotion out there, but not overstep your bounds and not piss people off or make people feel jealous. It's really hard.
That'll be fun to dive into next week when we talk about personal branding.
Yeah.
Because what we get to deal with now, as for those of us that are early in our career, are not only meeting people, but also trying to have that good presence. It's have a good resume, have a good portfolio, a good website, a good business card. Do well, be personable, do well at mixers and other, in-person events, and then have a social media presence, number one, because if you don't have one, you're suspect. But then what you do have on social media is a whole other thing. Like, you have to be your own marketing machine at this point, and it's exhausting. You got to be really good at this whole job of getting a job, and then also be good, if not great, at the job you're trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's enormous, like, emotional toil, and just like an energy toil, because you could be spending all your time, trying to make your skills better, but instead you're spending all the time, trying to market yourself and make the connections and managing all of that.
Yeah, I would say that freelancing is doing 3 jobs at once. You have to get the job, do the job, and get paid for the job. Those are your 3 jobs as a freelancer. And, they're sort of, from time and again, each one of those can be a full-time job, even, sometimes, I'm guilty of failing at several of them at once. It's like, especially when you're focused on doing the job and you forget to try to get the next job, and you finish that job, you're like, oh no, what's the next job? And where have I gone wrong?
I mean, from my perspective, freelancing is all about relationships.
Yeah.
And part of your social media, efforts is all about creating those relationships with people and getting them to trust you and understand what you do and your work ethic and everything you want them to understand. And I've found, as well as a lot of other veteran freelancers, that once you have established a lot of those relationships in a lot of different companies and with the people, creative directors, art directors, people in decision-making positions, that becomes less of a priority in your life in general. It's like, I don't have to, thankfully, I don't have to keep, staying on my social media constantly and advising people what I do, because I have those relationships now. And now it's more of like, hey, bro, what you working on? As opposed to, let me figure out what to write on social media.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is like a catch-22 there, because I can certainly really, from my film experience, it's like ultimately the best networking happens by working with people on a project, and like that those are the people that like you end up like getting really like acquainted with and know really well. And so there is a little bit of a catch-22, is like, well, the best networking is going to happen like once you've actually like been in it and gotten those first few gigs, and the process before then is very, very different, and it's a lot much more like, I need everyone to like have my name in their face, so like we can like start building those relationships.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that my marketing department is my previous clients. Hopefully I've done a good job and they're happy with me and they'll recommend me to somebody else. That's, I think, my best marketing, because, shotgun marketing and theme entertainment for a composer and sound designer is, I think, difficult at best. It's a very niche thing. And it's not like, people who work in, the concept and development, where, there's way more artists needed than composers, because, a small percentage of projects actually get built to the point where they need music. So there's a lot less of us. And, it's very much more rare that a composer will be higher than an artist.
I was going to say, I think that one of the other things that's also really difficult, and not to turn this into like a circle around Teddy and teach him all the things that we wish we would have known, but hey, if that's what you get out of this, then great.
My question.
I need to listen. More than glad to listen.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question. Do you guys have any advice? So go ahead.
Well, another huge part of it, and this is the thing that like we kind of don't have a say in the matter, whereas companies hiring do, but not just like your skill set in your networking and building your relationships, but a huge part of it also is just being consistent in it. I mean, I'll admit that there's been more than once where I will have gotten a job, but the job was all consuming and it didn't allow me the opportunity to be able to keep up with people, either virtually or in person. I mean, for example, I'd spent most of the last 2 years as a tour manager. So I was on the road most days of the year, even over the pandemic. So it made it difficult to kind of keep up with people. But when I did have breaks between tours, I tried to, hit the Rolodex, go through my text messages and catch up with people again, because I think that it's very important to, again, maintain, keep up your relationships. It's make the connections and maintain them. More than once, some people kind of found that as a disingenuous effort. They thought that there was an ulterior motive in there, which, yeah, like it happens to be a time at which I could use a paycheck, sure, but also it's important to keep up with people, so that you just ask them what they've been up to and ask about their personal lives and stuff like that. Like, you actually care about people, because obviously we got to do life together as well as work together. But yeah, it can be kind of a hit and miss of the people that you are connecting with, the people that you're making relationships with. But no matter what type of response you get, just keeping up, being consistent. I had a friend of mine who's an executive producer who told me You need to keep being persistent without being annoying. And if you're going to reach out to people, always have something to basically report on. There's got to be some different. Just reaching out to say, hey, is a little, it's harder for them to argue actually responding to that and engaging that dialogue, versus if you actually have something to report to them, something new that you've worked on, whether it's your own project, a job you've had recently, some sort of an experience you did. But yeah, it's just more a part of that whole, like, being your own marketing machine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, also it's important that you be known for doing something. Everybody, I'd hate to pigeonhole anybody, but like, I think that part of your personal brand, and we can talk about this more in the next show, with personal branding, is that, like, I think, there's so many people, and you have to network with so many people and keep everybody in mind and whatnot. It helps that, like, you're known for doing like one or two things. Like, people know me as the music and sound guy, like, Trevor, what would you want people to think that you're, like, known for? Like, what's your thing? I think everybody needs to find their thing and advertise that and emphasize that. Do you know what I mean?
If you ask people at this point, it's me with theme parks and cocktails.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at your social media, it's just like, drink around the world. Oh, it's funny.
It's benchmarking.
Sure. That's what
it'll pay off one day when you're hired as, like, the chief mixologist someplace.
Right.
To be fair, it's a hobby that I got into over the pandemic.
Well, let's wrap things up. Everybody have some final thoughts before we wrap it up today, and start to think about personal branding for next week's. Who wants to go first? Melody, go first.
So my final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
I want to say that freelancing is hard. Freelancing is not for everybody. And if you get yourself into freelancing and you realize that it's really not for you, that's okay. And I want to also say that, like, everybody goes through ebbs and flows and throughout their whole life too. And I want to say, like, you don't have to, once you go freelance, you're not committing to freelance forever. If you take a full-time job, you're not committing to a full-time job forever. Like, you can always change your mind and change your lifestyle, because that's really what you're choosing to do right now. Is if you're choosing to be a freelancer, you're choosing that lifestyle. If you're choosing a full-time job, part-time job, contract job, it's another lifestyle. And I just want to say that, like, be easy on yourself. And if freelancing is not for you, it's okay. Just transition into the other things and find the things that suit your lifestyle in that time of your life, because it will change. And that's what I want to say. I hope that helped.
That's really good advice. I agree 100% with that. That's great. Thank you.
No.
Kira.
Sure. I mean, I think if I could have one humble request to people who are in position of hiring, it would be, like, if I know your lives are busy, but if you can, really try to improve communication with the people you're looking for and the connections you're making, I think that makes things better for everyone. And if it does take a little bit of extra effort, but if we can and I think it goes both ways too, but if we can improve our communication and transparency, like, I think that will help everyone a lot.
Another good point. Thanks, Kieran.
Very good.
Teddy, what are your thoughts?
I think my thing is, since graduating everything, one of the things that's kind of been reinforced with the pandemic and trying to get into the industry, since second grade, it was okay. I felt like I was a real estate developer, my whole family, my whole business, I grew up, like, on construction sites and everything. But when I found out, like, people got to create these places that you can escape and everything, it, like, blew my mind, right? And one of the things during the pandemic that it kind of reminded me of is, like, how lucky everyone is to be able to be in this industry and create those things and those places. Like, even when I go to, like, Disneyland or theme park stuff and I see, like, a kid come off of a ride and they're, like, excited, or, like, Spider-Man comes over to them and they're like, this is really Spider-Man stuff. I don't know, just for me, like, even though it's been difficult over the past few years and trying to get it, just like that, trying to remind yourself that, like, what you're doing and, like, what why we're all in this, and especially like with all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world, that like just having places and experiences that people get to go to and kind of just relax for the day and just be with their family and friends and everything. I think like a lot, if we can just like remember that while we're stressing out about those things, I think that's just super important. I hope anyone out there, especially someone who might be my age, similar, trying to get in and have been stressing, like, where do I go? Do I go back to get my master's? Like, do this? How do I get a call with that? Like, don't forget like why you wanted to get in here, and just remember that, just it'll kind of keep you and push you to keep trying to get into the industry.
Another really great thought. I appreciate that. That's awesome.
Teddy's my
Trevor.
spirit animal.
Trevor, you brought us all here today. What are your final thoughts?
I think that because I'm still a student at all this as well, I think that and Andy can attest to this because he's more than once given me notes and feedback on stuff. But I think that when it comes to things like job hunting, I know that I can always learn. I mean, things are always changing, and I know that I can always learn and do better. I think that one thing that I'm constantly in evolution on is specifically in that social media presence. I know that resume requirements are always changing, what recruiters like to see, how to, basically trick computer algorithms. So it's a constantly evolving thing. And it's something that I've kind of trained my mindset to, of knowing how to always be good at looking for a job. And then I think I just kind of want to echo what Kira has said about, I think that if I were to make one ask of companies or those with hiring power, it's just, I know it adds more work, but if it's possible to have, even if it's like a generic kind of thanks but no thanks, automated email, some sort, just communication. Communication is like, no matter what type of a relationship it is, communication is huge, if not most important. And I think just even if it is a denial or a things are on hold, just keeping up with people is huge and makes a world of difference. It helps people's mental health for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd like to see that as well. And I should, I'm going to try to do better with that myself in light of our conversation. But you mentioned the computer algorithms. Last year, I applied for a job for the first, like a real job, like a job, sitting at a desk at a company for the first time in, I don't know, over 20 years. And I had no idea about like all the computer algorithm pre-selection process, sorting the computer AI, sorting resumes and whatnot. I had no idea about that. I was just like, I'm just going to write a cover letter and here's my list of credits. That's all you need. Because like, if I were to put a resume, it's just going to be like, what? Like, it's just going to be a list of credits because I haven't worked for a company that wasn't my own in 25 years or so. So like I found out, actually Jason McManus informed me of how this whole thing works. And I was like, oh, that's probably, even though I was the exact, like, there were only a handful of people in the world who could actually do the job. And I was one of them. They probably didn't see me because I didn't do it correctly. And I didn't know what I didn't know about applying for a job in a corporate position like that. And, I'm still learning too. I'm 48 years old and I've been doing this for 25 years. And like, well, I learned something and it's a bummer that I had to learn it that hard way, but I think that never be afraid to ask for advice, I think is a really good one too. And to, sort of be persistent and never give up.
Heck yeah. Well, this is only, like I said, guys, this is only going to be the first half of a two-part conversation. So next week is going to be another big conversation where we're talking about just personal branding. So a lot of the stuff that we got to touch on here, specifically in the world of social media, we're going to touch on next week. So that'll be another big one. Hopefully for a lot of the open-ended things we kind of brought up today, we can get some resolution to them next week. But otherwise, thanks everyone for being here.
Really quick, one last word. I want to address Damien's question. CJ, if you can bring up Damien's last question there. Here's one thing I've learned about resumes right now and applying for jobs is that in your cover letter and on your resume somewhere, you need to regurgitate the job description in the job application thing. Whatever the job description is for the job you're going after, just put it right back on your cover letter and in your resume. And apparently that's what tricks the computer. So that's what I've learned.
Huzzah.
Literally copy paste the job description. onto
Or
page
actually,
2 of
one
your
other
resume.
hack I have learned is, like, it is possible to, if you can apply for as many jobs as possible, just so you can get yourself into the system and get someone to reach out to you that's on the recruiting end. You can often therefore have their contact information from that point on, and then the other future thing you apply for, you can email the recruiter and be like, hey, can you make sure someone sees my resume, and they'll like pop the flag or whatever, so that your resume at least gets eyes on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Damon, it is just like 6th grade English class. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. We'll have more about that next week in personal branding. I think we can touch on the job search and like the more technical stuff behind that and all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Trevor, Melody,
Podcast.
Kira, and Teddy. You guys are great. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody.